Hello, this is Dr. E. We're going to be covering Unit 1.6 on the phosphorus cycle. Here we're going to be explaining the steps and reservoir interactions in the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus cycle basics. This is the movement of phosphorus atoms and molecules between sources, sinks, and reservoirs. Rocks and sediments contain phosphorus minerals. They are the major reservoirs. Phosphorus is very slow compared to carbon, water, and nitrogen cycles. It takes a long time for phosphorus minerals to be weathered out of rocks and carried into soil and bodies of water. There is no gas phase of phosphorus. I think I said that. There's no gas phase of phosphorus. It doesn't enter the atmosphere. Because it cycles so slowly, it is a limiting nutrient, meaning plant growth in ecosystems is often limited by the phosphorus available in the soil or water. It's needed by all organisms because it's part of DNA, part of ATP, and part of bone and tooth enamel in some animals. Sources of phosphorus. It's a major source of phosphorus is weathering rocks that contain phosphorus minerals. Wind and rain break down rock and phosphate, which is released and dissolved in water. Rainwater carries phosphate into nearby soils and bodies of water. Weathering is so slow that phosphate is often a limiting factor in aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem. Synthetic or human-made sources of phosphorus are obtained by mining phosphate minerals and adding to products like synthetic fertilizers and detergents or cleaners. Synthetic fertilizers containing phosphates are added to lawns or agricultural fields, runoff from phosphate into nearby bodies of water. The phosphates from detergents and cleaners enter bodies of water via wastewater from the homes. As you can see here. Assimilation and excretion. Just like nitrogen, phosphorus is absorbed by plant roots and assimilated into tissues. Animals get it by eating plants or other animals. Animal waste, plant, and other biomass is broken down by bacteria or soil decomposers that return it to the soil. It forms almost a mini cycle, so the assimilation, excretion, decomposition are a mini cycle within the phosphate cycle, just like assimilation and modification in the nitrogen cycle, or photosynthesis and respiration in the carbon cycle. Phosphate doesn't dissolve very well into water. Much of it forms solid bits of phosphate that fall to the bottom of sediment and sedimentation. Phosphorus sediments can be compressed into sedimentary rock over long periods of time by pressure from the overlying water. Geological uplift is how it returns. Tectonic plate collisions force rock layers that form mountains. The phosphorus cycle can start over again with weathering and release of phosphate from the rock. Eutrophication, too much nitrogen phosphate. Because they're limiting nutrients in ecosystems, extra input of nitrogen phosphorus lead to eutrophication, which means true feeding, excess nutrients, which fuels algae growth. This can occur from fertilizer runoff, animal or human waste contamination. Algae bloom covers the surface of the water, blocking out sunlight and killing the plants below. Sunlight can't get through this. The algae eventually die off. When they do, the bacteria break down the dead algae, the dead plants, and use up the oxygen in the water because decomposition is an aerobic process. The lower oxygen levels in the water kills off aquatic plants, especially fish. The bacteria use up more oxygen to decompose the dead aqueous animals. This creates a feedback loop, which means less oxygen leads to more dead organisms, which means more bacteria decomposition, less oxygen, which means more dead organisms, causing what's called a dead zone. At the mouth of the Mississippi, it can be somewhere between 500 and 1,500 square miles. It can occur from fertilizer runoff. And what you can see here, nutrient buildup causes the plants to flourish initially, but eventually algae starts blooming, meaning there's no light for the plants. The decomposition occurs, which depletes the oxygen, and basically eventually the whole system dies. So practice FRQ 1.6. Can you choose two reservoirs depicted in the diagram above and describe how phosphorus moves from one to the other? Thank you. I hope this has been helpful.